Namaste and good morning to all. Welcome to the day two of Colaba Conversation, Mumbai's very own signature conference, being hosted by the Observer Research Foundation in collaboration with the Government of Maharashtra to discuss international policy issues affecting the city, the nation, and the world. I am Dhaval Desai, Vice President and Senior Fellow of ORF Mumbai, and I'm here to give you a brief overview of today's proceedings. On the day two of Colaba Conversation, we have for you some of the most engaging discussions on some of the most critical issues confronting all of us at the local, national, and international levels, featuring a plethora of experts from around the world. Our opening panel will have a senior member of Mumbai's corporate fraternity, Mr. Rajesh V. Shah. A Harvard alumni, he is the past president of the CII and currently the co-chairman and managing director of Mukand Limited. He is also a trustee of the ORF. Mr. Shah will engage in back-to-back conversations with young business leaders who will steer the growth of the corporate sector in the diverse fields of banking, finance, real estate, and clean and green energy. He will also speak to a young member of parliament to gain an insight into how the legislators and policymakers will help Mumbai business position this great city among the pantheon of global cities in line with the likes of New York, Shanghai, Singapore, Frankfurt, and London. Our noon panel will discuss how to make Mumbai a safer and better place for women from all walks of life, with city planning sensitive to women's needs. A panel thereafter will explore whether the world needs to create a global policy framework for cities, while another panel after that will seek to evaluate the efficacy of multilateral groupings such as the G20, which India will host as the chair in 2023. We will discuss greater regional cooperation across India's west coast, particularly the Gulf and the east coast of Africa, regions with whom Mumbai has shared historical ties that date back over several millennia. The afternoon sessions will also discuss ways to define the role of megacities in devising a new Green Deal for India and indeed the world, and explore solutions for adaptation and mitigation for meeting the climate targets in the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow. Friends, the fourth industrial revolution is set to radically transform the way we live. Towards the evening, our expert panelists will discuss how the world, especially India, with all the excitement about its demographic dividend, will deal with its unsettling disruptions. Our penultimate session, in fact, will also discuss ways to fix responsibilities and create regulatory frameworks for the unrestrained digital space. And we will conclude the inaugural session of Colaba Conversation with a conversation with Shri Aditya Thackeray, Minister, Environment and Climate, Tourism, Government of Maharashtra. I now invite Mr. Rajesh Shah to kickstart today's first session, which is called The New Vision from Business for Positioning Mumbai in the World. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction and welcome to this really important conversation with five young, highly articulate leaders of Mumbai, some in business, some in politics, but all passionate about Mumbai. What can one say about Mumbai or Bombay, which we were born in? A city that has grown over centuries from fishing villages, which were probably converts. People who lived here were converts from into Christianity, and then grown with so many coming in from outside and the contribution of those who are here. Today, this city is clearly the number one business city of India. And that is with over 30% of the tax collections of India come just from the Mumbai and greater Mumbai area. Financial transactions, the Reserve Bank of India, the biggest public sector bank, and all the major private sector banking institutions, insurance institutions, are all based out of Mumbai. The greatest business houses, the houses of Tata, Reliance, Aditya Birla, Godrej, and so on, and also startups. So in this city, we are clearly ahead as far as India is concerned. how do we make this city, and what's our vision to make this city into something that becomes the brand ambassador worldwide, and it is recognized with the great cities of commerce around the world, whether it's New York, Frankfurt, London, Singapore, Hong Kong. So our first guest today, I'm really happy to introduce her, is Ms. Priyanka Chaturvedi. She's a member of parliament from the Shiv Sena party, which is the ruling party here in the state of Maharashtra. She is a person whose family has come from outside Mumbai, but she's very much a Mumbai person and someone who feels so strongly about the future of Mumbai. She has a huge social media presence, has been actively involved in so many causes. So without saying any more, Priyanka, could you share with us what your vision is in how we make our city, the city of Mumbai, in the global pantheon of great cities? Please.
Thank you so much for having me on this very important panel and a very important discussion as well, especially about a city which I'm, like you mentioned, totally passionate about, and so are you. So it gets interesting when people are on the same wavelength about an issue they're passionate about. Just to take you back in history, if you would remember post-World War II, before we got our independence, 8 of the biggest industries that were in Mumbai and these industrialists had set up a Bombay plan. What was the Bombay plan? The Bombay plan gave a vision and a mission for the future of this nation post-independence. A lot of that was also incorporated in 3 of our 5-year planning. However, it came under a lot of criticism, but the idea is that the genesis of all economic growth, economic plan, and being the economic engine has begun from the city of Mumbai. And that is when it becomes extremely relevant and important that we ensure that with every change of revolution, the first, second, third, and now the fourth, we are in the middle of fourth because of the pandemic. Many were wondering when would this happen and when would this dawn come upon us. It is here, and we are talking about it now. And considering Mumbai is I would say, the growth story and the growth engine for the country, contributing about 6% of the GDP of the country. We are aiming to take Maharashtra, and Maharashtra happens to be one of the most economically empowered regions for India. So we need to ensure that when we talk about a $5 trillion economy for the nation, Maharashtra is at the forefront and Mumbai is leading it with at least a contribution and beginning of a $1 trillion economy. How do we get there? We would obviously need to create facilities, our infrastructure. There are some challenges on that front, and we've heard quite a bit of that. How we create more hubs for businesses, how do we create more growth stories, is by concentrating on, like I said, the digital space of it. And I think somewhere down the line, when the third revolution came upon us, the digital revolution that we saw, I felt that Mumbai missed out on that particular growth story, and we could have captured that space. Somehow we did not. Moving forward, we, as far as innovation is concerned, as far as startups are concerned, it is extremely heartening that Mumbai ranks amongst the top 3 destinations for startup hubs as well as innovation. So how do we move forward? I look at Mumbai again going and becoming the growth engine for the country post-COVID era, where we, through this platform, the Colaba conversation, we're setting out a very positive narrative about what we can do and how we can achieve those goals, and how India will be competing, especially Mumbai, would be competing with the likes of Singapore, Shanghai, etc., to be able to be the truly global city, which it actually is, but how we take it forward is something that we will work towards. And that is what our government is committed to. And it is also very heartening that the minute Shri Uddhav Balasaheb Thackeray ji took over as the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, the first meeting he did was an outreach to all the industrialists and called them all like a family member and as a senior most in the family, and spoke about his vision and how we can work on it and move towards our goal of taking it towards a $1 trillion economy. Urban spaces, urban cities are going to play a massive role. 70% of our GDP comes through urban cities. So it's time to talk about urban spaces and urban planning as well.
No, thanks a lot. Now, as you said, this plan that was put forward by the CM about a year back. I had some of my friends who were present there, and they were very impressed, both by him and by Ms. Aditya Thackeray and what they said. And so is this plan still on? Because when we look at business and government, because in one sense, you're representing the ruling party and the government, because the government has to play a role. Infrastructure and sustainably, or rather clean air, clean water, these things play a big role. I mean, all the cities we mentioned have wonderful clean air. Now, what can we do to make and great infrastructure too? Now, yes, we would probably have super broadband out here, and we have all of that. But how do we make sure that the infrastructure, which also includes roads, transport, and education, to bring it up? Because 25 million people, all of them working together to make, all of them working for themselves and for corporations or whatever they're working for, but generating business would be a huge world-class city anyway. So what kind of plans do you think you would make in this area?
Firstly, when we talk about building infrastructure, there is already work in progress. When we talk about a coastal road, when we talk about trans-harbor links, we're talking about metros and creating more sustainable development. And when we talk about metro, of course, the RA forest cannot be left behind, and how we manage to balance both the environment as well as ensuring that our infrastructure is not impacted, by finding a solution, by not cribbing about the problem, but by finding a solution. And that is how Maharashtra government looks at every issue. Now, in terms of incentivizing industries, we have come up with a very interesting industrial policy also, which is after taking feedback from that particular meeting, to ensure that all cutting edge technology is available for businesses to set up, cutting down on red tapeism. For example, tourism is going to be one big opportunity for Maharashtra. And thankfully, it is in the right hands. It's with Shri Aditya Thackeray, where we have categorically spoken about how we cut down on the license requirements for setting up hotels, setting up places for people to stay. Women are going to be a very important part of this conversation, creating safety networks of women, open spaces, public spaces for women, and bringing them into the economic infrastructure of the city is something that, again, is part of our development plan. So these are a few things as far as we are concerned. And then the most important, the fourth pillar of any progress, are the laborers who come from outside the state, creating, and outside the city as well. So creating affordable housing for them. We are perhaps one of the first states that during COVID have cut down on our own revenue to be able to incentivize construction spaces. So creating affordable housing, creating a women's safety infrastructure, creating infrastructure which meets you from end to end, public transport, and also creating world-class infrastructure for people to be able to get through to their work and their residence is something that we are working upon. It is an entire plan in action and work in motion, which many are witness to at the speed at which the coastal road is coming along, or our trans-harbor links, or our bridges, etc.
Thanks for that. I think we already have a really good, comprehensive idea from this conversation that the government of Maharashtra, which it really has to, is also putting Bombay first. And we're going to make this a global hub of business and make that a true symbol of our country, as well as to how dynamic our country is. So thank you so much, Priyanka, for being with us, and hope to continue this conversation year after year as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Continuing this conversation, I'm really happy that we now have Radhika Gupta. She's the CEO and the MD of Edelweiss Asset Management Company. She's a graduate from the Wharton School. And I would just say that we go to her, but she describes herself as a girl with a mission and wings of fire. Now, I think we need to know what you believe should be the mission for Mumbai. And Wings of Fire is actually quite good, because the early builders of Mumbai were Parsis, and that's especially symbolic for them. So over to you, Radhika.
Thank you so much, Rajesh and ORF, for having me. And Secondly, I've always believed that Mumbai is a city with its own wings of fire. I mean, you put everything in front of Mumbai and it finds a way to fly. So perhaps that takes from Mumbai. But interestingly, I think the commercial capital of any country, and I've grown up in 4 continents across the world, really shapes the brand image of the country. And as I was telling you, I grew up and I saw my father representing India from 1976 to mid 2000s as a diplomat overseas. And I saw that as our economic stature changed as a child, I saw the noise around India. In fact, the way he was treated with his counterparts also changed in that period. So I remember going to school in the early 90s overseas, and people used to talk to a school kid who was 7, 8 years old and say, did you grow up in a land of snake charmers or do you go to school on elephants? I mean, believe it or not, this was the kind of stuff you used to hear. And then when the technology revolution happened and Pokhran happened in the mid 90s, and I moved to Italy, that narrative about India had suddenly changed. Suddenly we were an emerging superpower. Suddenly we were the country of techies. And then by the time I graduated in mid 2000s, it was an exciting time to be an Indian, but yet nobody wanted to come back to India. I mean, people still wanted to immigrate abroad for the American dream. By the time mid 2000s have happened, the 2010 era, you have more and more people wanting to make a home in Mumbai, despite the fact that they've lived abroad. And I actually think the demand for them is probably less than the supply of them. And I think that's the way the brand of the country has changed. And when I think about Mumbai, I think Mumbai plays a pivotal role in that brand, and Mumbai has to reflect the brand that is India, changing India, which is an economic superpower. And I think if I look at Mumbai, that's what it has to do. I remember Dad and I went to Shanghai 2, 3 years ago, and I think Shanghai gets this right. There is a museum that talks about the vision of Shanghai, and it's incredible because they tell the story of Shanghai from the 1500s to present. And they talk about Shanghai as being the city of tomorrow, the city of the future. When I think of Mumbai, when I was sitting and watching that whole display of Shanghai, I said, why can't this happen for Mumbai?
Okay, so we just pick it up straight from there. Whether it's Shanghai, it's Singapore, it's Frankfurt.
Yeah.
You made a career now in the world of finance. What will it take for business, government, and anybody else to make Mumbai a global financial center?
Absolutely. I think the number one is infrastructure. I'm sitting in the middle of perhaps the best infrastructure as I'm recording this conversation, BKC. But infrastructure in Mumbai, even if we are a financial capital, can't be confined to BKC. It has to be a city where it's easy to live and it's easy to work and it's easy to commute. When I think of financial capitals of the world, they have a sense of a financial hub. The best example I can think of is DIFC in Dubai. It's a buzzing financial capital. And I really think we need to build on infrastructure. Today, incidentally, I think housing continues to be and affordability continues to be one of the biggest challenges that Mumbai has outside of commute. I think COVID has given us an opportunity to rethink infrastructure also. Why does Mumbai have to be a city that just relies on physical infrastructure? Why can't we be one of the most technologically wired and technologically smart cities with little hubs like Navi Mumbai around, making it easy for people to work digitally and do business digitally across Mumbai? Why can't there be multiple BKCs spread all over greater Mumbai and connected to each other? I think infrastructure is the first biggest thing that we need to look at. The second thing that I would say, and this is very close to my heart, is this part of tourism and making Mumbai a serious tourism destination. When you think of the brand of any city, and many of the cities you mentioned, they are also, by the way, a lot of them happen to be port cities. They are also cities that are serious tourist destinations. I think today, when you have a business traveler come into Mumbai or a client come into Mumbai, you often struggle beyond the traditional vada pav and gateway of India, etc. as to how I can engage them and what I can do with them. Most cities, including I grew up in New York for a large part of my life, use the fact that they are port cities beautifully. I think we don't invest enough in Mumbai's water infrastructure. And can we use that to make Mumbai a world-class tourism city? Absolutely. Because today, and there's a classic example in Mumbai, we've got one of the finest airports in the world. I think we've got a better airport than Frankfurt and New York and most of the European airports. When you step into Mumbai airport as a foreigner and you drive out, you feel a sense of wow. Unfortunately, that sense of wow doesn't extend to the larger part of the city. So if we can get tourism and infra and technology right, I think we are going to go a long way in Mumbai.
No, that's really good. I think the idea that there could be hubs around and which could become multiple BKCs, or at least if not multiple, at least 4 or 5 of these, and then they're connected and they could become and support the entire sort of idea of financial transactions increasing. But people also need to see each other face to face. And BKC, can it be made to grow? Can it become even better? These are the sort of ideas that we need to do it. But in terms of marketing, how do we get the, we have every major financial institution represented in some way or the other, mostly in BKC, global ones. How do we get them to do much more out here and do their global operations and feel that, yes, just like some countries, some of these companies may think that, yes, we operate between London and Tokyo, but now it should be between, say, Frankfurt and Mumbai. Any ideas?
I think you need to pick up the ease of doing business in Mumbai, to be frank, for a global company. And I think cities like Bangalore and Pune, especially as centers, to a certain extent Hyderabad also, as centers for global operations, have found ways to do that. They have created special hubs where ease of doing business is very, very high, where you can put a large employee base. I think we need to create those pockets in Mumbai. And I think we need to have active conversations with global corporates about how Mumbai is changing. Mumbai is not Slumdog Millionaire. Mumbai is not Trends. Mumbai is not Vada Pav. Mumbai is not the Mumbai of the past. I think you need to craft a new narrative around the city of Mumbai and actually talk to people about how we are changing that narrative. Incidentally, outside of having the financial sector, we are also the cultural capital of this country. We also have one of the largest film industries in the world. And I always have believed films, by the way, are a tremendous source of soft power and brand that can be leveraged. Even the depiction of Mumbai, by the way, in our films, because that is ultimately the way people recognize, that's the way the common global Indian also recognizes India. That can be leveraged to improve brand image Mumbai.
Well, thanks a lot. I think the whole idea of marketing and then marketing with passion, I guess you're going to be in on that as well. I can already see that you are. And so thanks very much for being with us for this conversation.
Thank you so much.
I'm happy now to welcome one more of our guests for this conversation, and that's Darshan Hirnandani, the CEO of the Hirnandani Group. Now, this is one of the most well-established Mumbai groups in development of Mumbai and playing an active, intelligent role in working with the authorities. So I think we have a lot to talk about. So Darshan, welcome. Let me just say first that we have vast majority of our city people living in, let's put it this way, very diplomatically, less than satisfactory housing conditions or education. If all that were to change, if that were to look like what maybe a third of Bombay looks like, or what Singapore looks like, then I see tremendous amount of energy suddenly coming out of this city and are achieving our goals. So what do you think, or how do you think we can go about really making some dramatic changes in the way this city looks like and its livability?
So Rajesh Bhai, great seeing you as always. And I think the point is extremely pertinent and something that can be addressed in stages and parts. I think the reality of the situation is that you need a petri dish or a laboratory of the right experiment, the right model. And I'll give you an example. There were some lost opportunities, and I'll talk through them because we should always learn from history. We redeveloped all these mill lands. We created huge amounts of surpluses. So in fact, we did the city a favor. We created huge surplus and we brought down the cost. Lovely idea. I think that worked well from an economics of cost of housing perspective. But what we did badly was we didn't plan them well. I mean, today they've become cesspools of excessive traffic clusters, and the ingress and egress has been subpar, even though the housing may be very modern and lovely and amenities and features, but we've actually not managed the bit out, just connecting into it, the green spaces, the open spaces, the parks. So genuinely, I feel that there are some opportunities where when we are doing any development, it should be a little better planned. When people see something nice, they're willing to emulate it, they're willing to expand it, they're willing to innovate on it. So I think that's one area where I feel we're lacking, and we should work a lot more in terms of planning holistically and creating some really cool some really cool spaces. We need green spaces. So in the latest urban plan, I don't know if you're aware, we're talking about a reclamation in Colaba, which will be entirely a big landscape park. So it'll be one of the, where we have our breakwater in Mumbai. They're going to fill that breakwater and they're going to create a phenomenal park. So I think that'll be an amazing development and space. But similarly, we've got a lot of these other areas where we need to keep pushing. For example, we're talking about huge amounts of slum rehab. Why can't that be designed with some parks and spaces for them as well? I think this bit certainly needs some working on, and I think it can be done.
No, all that sounds very good, but do you see something lacking somewhere in trying to make all these policies happen and really become fructuous? Because, we've been talking, yes, progress happens a little bit here, a little bit there, but it isn't as if we can get a really major overhaul of our city done as far as all of this infrastructure is concerned, and that's so essential. So what do you think can be done by business leaders like yourself?
Well, I think from our part, we are continuing to plan our townships the best we can, and they've rewarded us. The consumers have rewarded us in doing so. The offices have come in. We've incubated, huge amounts of companies, got jobs into the system. So it works. It's a virtuous cycle, so to speak, that pays itself off multifold if you have a long-term view. Similarly, I think the opportunity exists on a very large scale for government even today. So whether we can see BKC, unfortunately, the whole overall planning didn't happen right, but you've got some beautiful buildings, you've created a setup, you made it a little bit of a hub of commercial space, so good restaurants are starting to pick up there. So the activity and buzz is growing. But similarly, all the new pockets that we're redoing VT station, transforming the whole railway system there. We're talking about the whole waterfront connected to the Trans-Harbour Bridge being redeveloped. And genuinely, I think those have real opportunities to be iconic if they are master planned, and the government should go out and say, look, whoever's coming in, we'll give you your incentive to build more because density is required. But simultaneous with that, you have to also create the open space, the retail, the connectivity, the public transport integration into it. So it feels wonderful, feels magical. It should feel like hey, this is what an excellent urban future of India is going to look like. And it doesn't have to be across Bombay. If we do one, it'll slowly percolate itself through the system. So I think that's extremely important. I think the other bit that's a real opportunity for Mumbai is the rest of our utilities. So today, let's talk about water. We unfortunately don't recycle enough water in our city. So it's very poorly done. And I think we have a situation where people don't recycle. We get cheap water from the city. When we get it, it's great. When we don't, we pay the water tanker mafia. We pay them 20 times, 50 times, and we are okay doing it. if we recycled our water, we used it well, we'd never have a single shortage in our city. So I just think that there are so many different elements. One, in terms of everyday quality of life of residents who live here. We want to attract people here. This is going to be the Mumbai is the city of dreams for the people in our country, for foreigners to come in. I think a lot of these elements, if we focused and took one of them at a time, I think they can be addressed quite well. Of course, it'll take 3 years, 5 years, 7 years to feel the large impact of the transformation, but a lot of these areas can be addressed quite easily.
Great. So definitely sense your enthusiasm. I think your commitment to making different things happen of a high quality in Mumbai. And that's the way to go. I think we have to work closely with the government, carry the society together, make these sort of plans which show that, yes, we can have a much, much higher quality of living, but also with sustainability and ideas like water recycling and improving our air quality and green spaces and so on. So the opportunity is there. So I must thank you, Darshan, for your ideas, and really really hope that you continue to stay fully involved, and then we can make this dream of Mumbai being this big brand ambassador for India in every possible way. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Thank you so much, Rajesh Bhai. Thank you very, very much.
So now we have our final guest, and I'm really glad to welcome this young gentleman, Mr. Jai Kotak, who comes from a most illustrious family and from the world of finance. He's the Associate VP at the Kotak Mahindra Bank and has recently come back from Harvard Business School. So welcome, Jai. And before I start anything, both Jai and I own Kabaddi teams. I will not say who wins in the matches, but Jai has lots of good ideas, I feel. And let's take a very big question, Jai. If we wanted Mumbai to become one of the top 5 financial centers of the world, what do you think we need to do? Because when that happens, India really comes on the map.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Shah, for that generous introduction. I would say, first, we must acknowledge that I'm 31 years old, and in my time, born and raised in Mumbai, there has already been a significant amount of progress. And the Mumbai that I know it is radically improved in almost every way. And I think that before starting, that's something we must acknowledge. As far as where we could go in the future, I think it's a 2-step process for me. One is regime liberalization, so to speak, followed by tighter regulation. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I mean, in terms of liberalization, it's to attract talent and capital, enacting policy changes that make that possible. If you think about cities like London or New York or Singapore, one of the things that they do very well is they are places where people want to move to.
Yes.
Whether it be for nightlife, whether it be for restaurants, whether it be for good schools, museums, etc., etc., etc. And I think Mumbai has some way to progress there. The second is, in addition to attracting the talent, attracting capital. In that context, we need to figure out how to better compete with regulatory regimes like Singapore and Dubai, which, in my opinion, are the primary competitors or threats to kind of Mumbai's ability to grow. And the big one there is ease of business and taxation. Taxation is particularly complicated because India rightly has a tax code that is structured for the whole country, and we do not necessarily have the luxury of going the Singapore Dubai kind of laissez-faire ultra low tax route. But we need to think of some via media by which maybe we isolate out a small zone in Mumbai or do something or the other to compete with these jurisdictions on taxation. Once both of these things happen, and I think the first one has to happen before the second, which is the liberalization, then we need to tighten regulation and make it harder for people to actually do financial activity in India from outside of India. For example, there are plenty of hedge funds right now that sit out of Singapore. There are plenty of foreign investment vehicles that come in through Mauritius. These are all legal, these are all permitted. And if we believe that we have the domestic infrastructure to handle this kind of demand, there's no reason why we should allow these. There's no reason why a company based in India with 95% of its business in India, as an example, I'm not on any one specific company, should be allowed to list or primarily list in Singapore or London when Mumbai has the requisite infrastructure. But again, only after we believe we've made ourselves even more attractive than we are today can we kind of go heavy-handed on regulation, because that is a double-edged sword.
No, so everything that you've said now, as far as the second part is concerned, I understand the first part is how do we make Mumbai a more attractive city to live in, to enjoy, to be in, to come in and out of the hotels and so on. And of course, as you know, there are many pockets of excellence throughout the city, but it's not enough. It doesn't compete with the cities that we spoke about. The other are regulations, which means it is really for the city of Mumbai, the government of Maharashtra, to work with the finance ministry and the government of India, whether for the finance industry in Mumbai, that is what they choose to develop, can we have a separate kind of for certain kinds of things to attract the capital, to attract people, or to attract the transactions to go through Mumbai, a separate kind of a tax regime, and also a regulation that allows for lots of different work which is being done outside to be done in Mumbai. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, I think the first one before the second, but both together would be where I'm at. And yes, any such initiative would have to be led by the government of Maharashtra, but will require, some elements of it are within the purview of the central government.
So do you see actually the leaders of finance, and here we are in Mumbai, which has the Reserve Bank of India, which has all the major, the biggest of the public sector banks, and it has all the biggest of the private sector banks as well, and all the big insurance companies, and it's pays up more than 1/3 of all taxes of the whole of India is from Mumbai city itself. So do you really see there's an incentive for government of India to do this? I mean, what could they hope to gain, or incentive for the government of Maharashtra, and how could we get them both doing this?
I think that as an Indian, I would want to see outstanding excellence from India, and I think that being within the financial space, having an outstanding city is something that all Indians, including the government, I'm sure, would be most incentivized to do. Of course, with all the other variables being balanced out in that context.
No, so I do hope, because when I mentioned all these other institutions, the leaders of these institutions, both present and the past, they're all very prominent people in Indian society, and they're people that the government looks to for their opinion. So how we ought to get them together in some way, I think, and hope that you can also be very much part of it. Let me come to another subject, because wherever there is a place which is seen to be a hub of finance in the world, you also see a place where there is a huge amount of interest in startups. Now, it's a bit strange that Mumbai is not number 2 or number 3 in startups, while Delhi and Bangalore, which don't even compare even in India as financial centers, have more startups. So what do you think we could be doing differently? I mean, you might also be interested in startups or giving support to startups. So what do you think we could do to attract or make the possibility of more startups happening right here?
I would agree with you that on new age startups, Mumbai is probably ranked 3rd in India. For me, the first part of the solution is still the same. You want to attract talent to come here. Another thing, however, is a little structural and a little more difficult to change because it's rooted in geography. Mumbai is a more expensive place for a young company to start. Salaries here are higher, rent and real estate cost here is higher, and some of that is because we are an island. We don't have the ability to sprawl the way Delhi and Bangalore do. So for companies to come here and so-called start in the garage shed the way they do in other parts of the world is harder. And also salaries here are, I would guess, certainly slightly higher. So that's a more complicated one, but again, with quality of living, I think can be resolved. In that context, things like the metro, things like the coastal road, regulation that allows restaurants to stay open, is all very positive.
Yeah. No, these are really good points, and obviously from Indian budgets of startups. But if we look at Silicon Valley, there couldn't be higher real estate prices or salary costs, and yet everybody keeps flocking over there because something seems to have worked in that sort of in that location. But listen, thank you very much. I think you've given a lot to think about, and I really hope that you would stay involved in this, and as you progress, just get more with others who can make sure that we can work towards making Mumbai the one of the top 5 in the world as far as a finance center is concerned. So thanks a lot for joining us today.
Certainly, Mr. Shah, it's been my pleasure.
Thanks. So we've had a lot of very good ideas that have come up, and I'm really glad that we had with us a group of young persons who are enthusiastic, come from a varied background, and are committed to making this city really special. So we have to have the cooperation between the business, the local government, the city government, and of course the central government to create a vibrant society that has excellent housing, green spaces, good education, health facilities, entertainment, and affordable to some extent, or to be able to create linkages elsewhere. And then work together to see how business, whether it's startups, it's the world of finance, it's the world of media, entertainment, and have a vision that takes us forward. So I hope that we'll be there, and I'm really confident that with the kind of energy that we've already seen, we should see a very different Mumbai in 5 years' time. So thank you for joining us.